What is up, everybody? Svenddiesel here with Sportsman's Warehouse. We're going to be tying up Pat's rubber legs. This is a pattern by Pat Bennett, a very popular stonefly nymph, and you can tie it in a variety of colors. This is one of my favorite. We're going to start here with the Daiichi 1720 in a size 10. Usually fish these in 10s, 8s, and 6s here locally. For our thread, we're going to be using a UTC 70 denier in black. And if you're tying it in other colors, match your thread to the body. For the weight, we're going to be tying in some lead wire in a .020. You can definitely use a .015 or go heavier depending on the water you'll be fishing it in. And for the body, the Chennile, we're using a beige and black speckled chenille. And I think the most popular is a coffee brown and black. I like this tan. It's a little bit lighter. And for the legs, we're going to be using this Flexi Floss in the color black. And you can also use yellow or gold for this as another excellent color combo. So let's go ahead and get started with our hook here in the vise. We're going to add the lead wire first so that this will be the underbody that's going to cause it to get down. And like I said, if you're fishing this in some deeper pockets, you can definitely add a little bit heavier of a lead wire or double stack it. We're going to basically fill, I would say, 3/4 of the shank with these lead wraps. Definitely want it to be a little heavy, and then just kind of pinch them together. And then I like to leave my tag end right there, and I'll show you how I get a clean take on that. So I'll start my thread right there behind that tag end. We'll trim out our tag end of the thread, and then I will work my way back over, and I'll do 2 wraps right here on that tag end, and that will allow me to kind of pinch it off later. And then I'll spiral wrap. Don't go parallel to those lead wraps. Make sure you go perpendicular, add a little thread base in the front, and then work my way back down again. And at this point we have 4 wraps over that lead, and it's just going to come right off. And I'll basically do a double take over here, or sometimes that's not necessary. So let's just end with our thread right there at the bend of the hook. And for the process of doing the legs, I like to do this a little different or similar to some people the way they do it. I'm going to take 3 strands of this Flexi Floss, and I'll trim off those 3 right next to the zip tie. And then I'm going to set one to the side, but the other 2 I'm going to grab and cut them in half. And these are going to be our legs in the middle of the fly, and the other piece will be used for the rear and the antennae. So I'll just go ahead and cut those in half, and so we'll have 4 pieces. You're going to not use one of them, but usually I'm tying multiple flies, and so I'll use that one for the next fly, and eventually you equal out tying so we're not wasting as much material. Now I'm going to align these so the tips are aligned. I've got more than enough coming off the back end of this hook, and then I'll do a pinch wrap right here and then work my way up over these lead wraps, just trying to keep that Flexi Floss there on the top of the shank. And then I'll be a little tricky here. You kind of have to drop it and grab it again with your hand, but when you finish, you want those 2 Flexi Floss strands to be on the top of the shank touching each other, so they're almost kind of 1 o'clock and 11 o'clock, and that way they'll spread out nicely and we can adjust it. And then I'll advance my thread back, and we'll basically taper these Flexi Floss down the bend of the hook now. And I'm not doing super tight wraps so it doesn't cut, and that way I'm also allowed to kind of adjust them sideways, and then we'll clean them up a little later with some tighter wraps now that we have thread over them. And so I'm a little tighter there than I was on my initial wraps. And now we're going to tie in the body material, which is that speckled chenille in the beige and black. I'm going to prep it by stripping off the actual beige and black, and so the cord is exposed. And I'm going to do a pinch wrap and trap that down right there, kind of in that recessed area, and we'll go ahead and tie that in and advance our thread roughly 2/3 up the way of the shank, so that we got 1/3 on the front end, 2/3 on the back end. And here we're going to tie in our legs. I grabbed those 3 strands. Remember, we had 4 that we had pre-cut, and I'm just going to grab 3 of them and leave 1 to the side, and I'm going to align them so that they're roughly the same length. They should be very close, and you've got a little bit of wiggle room. And I'll fold them in half around the thread, come up and over with a pinch wrap, secure that wrap first, and then I'll spread them out going to each side, and I will basically figure 8 these legs. And it can be difficult sometimes. These legs, you want them to move in the water so they're not stiff. The more movement you have with these legs, I think the better. And so that makes this process a little difficult. So just take your time, form them into a clump. You can see how I'm kind of working my way, extending down the leg with these figure eights, and so that they're roughly on the side of the shanks and going out perpendicular to the hook shank. So I'll take my thread up to right behind the eye. We'll go ahead and do a half hitch, and that way we don't lose our work, because the next process can be really fun if you've never done it before, working with this many legs. So we'll just kind of hold our thread here off to the side. And now a little trick I learned is, if you can wrap it up and deal with all these, that's great. You can also take these legs here and kind of fold them over onto our side, the side we're viewing right now, and just do one wrap of thread up and over, and that will kind of secure them out of our way for taking this chenille and wrapping it up the shank of the hook, and it makes it a little bit easier. So just touching wraps with the chenille, work your way up, take your time. Be careful not to knock your bobbin off the hook eye, and then all your legs get in the way. And then before we have about one wrap left, that's when I'm going to release the legs, come up and over, trapping one leg, and then I'll trap one leg on the opposing side. And you kind of want to grab the leg that is most going backwards. You'll see that some want to go straight out and forward, but ideally the chenille is forming which way it's going to go. And then when we go over this next section, you kind of need a third hand, but I'm going to trap the middle one and then extend out the front one as I go up and over. And this takes a little bit of practice, but it helps when you're doing the first wrap, hold the leg back, and then when you're doing the second wrap through this group, hold the front leg forward. And then we'll, of course, pull that front leg back, do a wrap up and over, and then trap them so that we have spread out these legs equally. They're kind of going equally outwards from the shank, if that's an appropriate way of describing it. And as you can see, these are more than long, so we're going to be trimming them off, and then we'll just finish here wrapping the chenille with another 1 or 2 wraps. Be careful not to crowd the eye, but leave enough room for it to cover the whole shank. And so I'll go ahead and tie that off right here. Be careful not to trap any of these flexi floss legs or the antennae in there, and we'll do some wraps behind and in front, and then go ahead and trim that out of your way. And I like to whip finish this a couple different ways. The one way is I kind of pull everything back and I'll do it underneath. I also like to do it over the top, and so I usually do 2 whip finishes. So I'll go ahead and start here underneath, do 4 or 5 turn whip finish, and that looks pretty good. So let's just trim it out. I like that better. The legs, the antennae, if they're going down, then you can prop them up more with the whip finish underneath, and then if they're going too high, you can do it over the top. So let's just call that as it is, and we'll trim these legs so they're equal. Kind of forming an oval is a good way of describing it. When this is in the water, they're going to move like crazy, and that's the Pat's rubber legs. All these materials are available at Sportsman's Warehouse. We'll have materials list in the description, so you can go ahead and click on what you need. I tie these up in a variety of different colors. This is one of my favorite, so go ahead and tie some up and fish them, and hopefully they slay it for you.